For this recipe, you're going to need scallions, garlic, ginger, and onions, shiitake mushrooms, Chinese chives, bok choy, lion's mane mushrooms, soy sauce, cornstarch, wonton wrappers, and some ground pork or turkey. Hello, welcome to another episode of Bville Live. Gung Hei Fat Choi, Happy New Year. I'm going to be making some delicious Chinese New Year traditional dishes with a little bit of an American twist. So I have some wonderful produce from Brady Farms, which is a sustainable farm in Syracuse, New York. It's an organic farm. They teach farming there, and it's an urban farm, which makes it extra special. So they sent in their most recent box, bok choy and pak choy, and we're going to be cooking with that and some delicious lion's mane mushrooms. Now, a lot of you may never have heard of lion's mane mushrooms, but they taste like lobster when you cook them up. So we're going to put those in with our dumplings that we're going to make today. And I don't want the meat to overpower the lion's mane mushrooms, so I'm going to use ground turkey. It's lower in fat than ground pork. We're going to be using shiitake mushrooms, which I've reconstituted here from dried, garlic, onions, and ginger, plenty of scallions, and these are Chinese chives. They taste like garlic. Okay, and then we'll add a cornstarch water paste that we're going to mix that with to help adhere it together. So I'm going to start chopping and I'll show you how to assemble. So the lion's mane mushrooms should be cooked first before you add them to your wonton skin wrappers. So I'm going to turn my heat on to medium. I'm going to put a small amount of olive oil in my pan. You can also use sesame oil, and you can add sesame oil to your wonton or your dumplings as well. I'm not going to do it because I try and cut back on oil when I can and fats. So I'm just going to chop my lion's mane mushrooms, and they're called lion's manes because they look like lion's manes. And these are fresh, organic mushrooms, which are really quite wonderful. So we're going to chop those up. It's almost like chopping up a sponge, okay? And they have a wonderful flavor once they're cooked, and they taste like crab or lobster, so you can use them in place of crab or lobster. So we're going to add them. A lot of times when people make dumplings, they add shrimp to the dumplings. I'm allergic to shrimp, so I'm going to use a vegetarian substitute, which would be the lion's mane mushroom. So I'm going to add those in, chop up the rest. The rest of the vegetables do not need to be cooked because you're going to be either boiling your dumplings or frying them, so you don't need to cook the meat up ahead of time, but it is recommended that you cook up the lion's mane mushrooms before they're added to anything. And they actually absorb quite a bit of water, so you don't really need to rinse them too much, and you certainly don't want to soak them in water. Okay, so they are in my pan, cooking up. We're going to let those cook up, and then I'm going to show you how to assemble after they're done. Okay, so my lion's mane mushrooms have cooked down, and as you can see, it even looks like cooked crab or mushrooms in the pot. And I have my ground turkey. I have about a half a pound of ground turkey in here, and I'm going to let the mushrooms cool. But before that, I wanted to show you something that I'm going to do. Now, I chopped up my greens, my scallions, my Chinese chives, and my pak choy, but you need to have it finely chopped for dumplings. So I'm going to run it through the food processor in addition to my shiitake and my garlic and onions and ginger, and I just kind of roughly chopped it to give it a head start. So the Chinese chives are kind of hard to chop up fine. You can actually use a scissor, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add these together in here and get them down to a fine chopped pile, and then I'm going to add them to my meat. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit at a time and try not to blast it out here. Now, if you have the patience and you want to chop these down finer, you know, that's by hand, that's entirely up to you. So hopefully this will work. So I'm going to go ahead and chop all this down, and I'm going to stop the video so I don't blast you out with a food processor. Okay, so I've chopped up all of my greens, all of my ginger, garlic, and I chopped into a very nice fine combination of flavor. So I'm going to add that to my ground turkey. And the reason I'm adding my greens first is because I want to give those lion's mane mushrooms a chance to cool, so that I don't end up cooking my meat and having chunks of it prematurely. So I'm going to get all that out. And I'm going to mix that in, and then eventually I'll use my hands. And then we're going to start assembling our dumplings. So now I'm going to add my lion's mane to it. And, you know, there's a bunch of different recipes for dumplings. I like to create my own recipes, so they may be a little bit different than what you're used to seeing or tasting. But I cook to my family's taste and what I like. And I always try and cook with a low-fat mindset. So that's why I use the ground turkey instead of pork. Pork is traditional. They can be made with ground chicken as well. You know, there's all kinds of different flavored dumplings. You can also make them vegetarian and just leave the meat out entirely. Okay, so I've got that fairly mixed up well, as you can see. And then I'm going to add some soy sauce to that. About a tablespoon of soy sauce. And then I'm going to add a blend of cornstarch and water. Okay, so after you've thoroughly mixed your vegetables with your meat, you're going to add 2 tablespoons of cornstarch and 2 tablespoons of water, and that's going to help thicken it as the vegetables cook. Vegetables tend to get off a lot of water, and you don't want your dumplings to be soggy, so this will help that bind together. So thoroughly mix that, and then we'll be ready to assemble our dumplings, and we have quite a bit of filling in here. So if you usually you make all your dumplings at once and then you freeze them, and then you can take them out of the freezer as you need them. They'll keep up to 3 or 4 months, and you can pop them into soup. You can cook them, fry them up in a pan, however you want to prepare them. And they stay very nicely in there. Now you can use the round dumpling wrappers, which are the traditional dumpling styles. I could not find any up here, so I am going to use the wonton wrappers, which will work just as well. Okay, so as you can see, that's thoroughly mixed. Now I'm ready to start assembling my wontons. So I'm going to get a baking sheet. I'm going to open up my wonton wrappers. And you don't want to take them totally out because you don't want them to dry out. Okay, and you're going to need a little bit of water. Okay, so I have a small plate to assemble on. I'm going to transfer my wontons onto a baking sheet that I'm going to pop in the freezer. I have a small dish of water, and that's going to help me seal my wonton wrappers. So set everything up in an assembly line for yourself. And you're going to grab a wonton wrapper, lay it with a point towards you, like a triangle, or you're going to be making a triangle. And then you're going to take about a teaspoon of meat. You don't want to overfill these because otherwise they're going to open up. So you put a teaspoon of meat in the center of your wrapper like that. You're going to dip your finger in the water and run it along the edges of the wrapper. Then you're going to fold your wrapper in half and press to seal those edges. Okay? And then you can fold the two ends towards you. So it looks like that. So it looks like a little house. Okay? And I'm going to set them up like this on my sheet. Okay? And we'll pop them in the freezer and then they'll cook up nice. So you can take a stack if you want and work from the stack, or you can pull them individually. You just want to keep that wrapper covered so they don't dry out. Now, usually this is done, with a family. You can get the kids involved. Everybody's out hiking right now, so I'm going to do this by myself. So go ahead and dip. I'm going to peel your wrapper up in half. And it doesn't matter whether you fold the corners to you or behind you, either way is fine. And that's what they look like, these cute little purses. Okay? So I'm going to fold up the rest of these and I'll show you what they look like when they're ready to go in the freezer. Okay, so after you filled up a tray or a baking pan with your dumplings, you can put them in the freezer and they can stay in there. After they freeze, you'll transfer them to a Ziploc bag. They can stay in there for up to 3 or 4 months. And then you can take them out as you need them, and you'll fry them up in a pan with some oil, which I'll show you in a few minutes, or you can add them to soup. Okay, to cook your wontons, you're going to put a tablespoon of oil in a pan. You're going to put the wontons in, and as they begin to cook, you're going to flip them over. Be careful that they don't burn. You can turn your heat down a little bit. And after you've browned them on both sides, you're going to add 2 tablespoons of water, cover it with a lid, and then they'll be done.